I'll never forget the sound of my voice echoing through those empty marble halls. For 2 years, I'd hidden who I really was. Lorenzo Batista, the name on posters from Milan to New York, was gone. I'd become Mateo, the night janitor who mopped floors at Ashford Global Enterprises. I'd left the opera world behind, searching for something money and fame could never buy. Real connection, peace, a life where people saw me, not my reputation. That night, I thought I was alone. I let myself sing, really sing, an aria from La Boheme that once brought audiences to tears across Europe. But I wasn't alone. Richard Ashford, the CEO, heard me, and what happened next would change everything. He stormed out of his office, his face twisted with rage and contempt. To him, I was just an uneducated Filipino nobody who dared to make noise in his building. He fired me on the spot, had security drag me out like trash, while young Isabel watched in horror from her desk. What Richard didn't know was that Isabel had recorded everything. My singing, his cruelty, his arrogance. Within hours, the video went viral. Millions watched, and the opera world, the world I'd left behind, recognized their missing tenor. Richard Ashford was about to learn the hardest lesson of his life. That dignity has nothing to do with your job title, and that judging a book by its cover can cost you everything. But let me take you back to where it all began. 6 months earlier, on a quiet Monday night, I pushed my cleaning cart through the gleaming lobby of Ashford Global Enterprises. 23 floors of glass and steel, towering over Manila's business district like a monument to power. My uniform was simple: blue coveralls, a name tag that said Mateo. My hands, once praised by music critics for their expressive gestures on stage, now gripped a mop handle. And I was happy. The night shift suited me perfectly. No crowds, no photographers, no one asking for autographs or recognizing my face from magazine covers. Just me, the quiet halls, and the work I'd grown to respect. I started on the first floor, mopping the marble lobby until it gleamed like a mirror. Then the second floor, vacuuming between rows of cubicles where people spent their days chasing promotions and deadlines. As I worked, I hummed softly. Old melodies from my past life. They kept me company in the silence. By midnight, I'd made it to the executive floor. This was my favorite part of the building. Tall windows overlooking the city lights, artwork on the walls, a sense of space and beauty that reminded me of the opera houses I'd left behind. I polished the reception desk where Isabel usually sat during the day. She was kind to me, always said good morning, even though I was just the janitor. She didn't know that such simple kindness meant more to me than 1,000 standing ovations. That particular evening, I thought the building was completely empty. The lights in all the offices were dark. The parking garage had been quiet when I arrived. I moved down the long marble corridor toward the corner offices, my footsteps echoing softly. And then, without thinking, I began to sing. Not humming this time, really singing. Che Gelida Manina from La Boheme, one of the most beautiful arias ever written. My voice filled the hallway, rich and powerful, the way it had filled concert halls across the world. The acoustics in that marble corridor were magnificent. Every note rang clear and true. I closed my eyes and let myself feel the music again. The passion, the longing, the pure joy of using the voice God had given me. For those few minutes, I wasn't Mateo the janitor. I was Lorenzo Batista again, pouring my soul into every phrase. Down at the reception desk, Isabel had returned. She'd forgotten her phone and come back to get it. She stood frozen, listening to my voice echoing through the building. Tears streamed down her face. She pulled out her phone and started recording. But there was someone else listening too. In his corner office, behind a door I'd thought was locked, Richard Ashford sat at his desk. He'd been working late, reviewing quarterly reports, and my singing had interrupted him. His face grew red with anger. His jaw clenched tight. How dare a mere janitor make such noise in his building? He stood up, straightened his expensive tie, and walked toward his door. My beautiful moment was about to become a nightmare. The door to Richard Ashford's office flew open so hard it slammed against the wall. He stood there in the doorway, his face purple with rage. His expensive suit couldn't hide the ugliness of his expression. I stopped singing mid-phrase. My cleaning cart stood beside me, mop in hand. I've learned in my 2 years of hiding that the best response to anger is calm. I set down my mop carefully and turned to face him. "Sir, I apologize. I thought the building was empty." His words stung, but I'd heard worse. Fame teaches you that cruelty often comes from insecurity. "I wasn't screeching, sir. I was simply singing while I worked. It won't happen again." Down the hall, Isabel gasped. I could see her standing by her desk, phone still in her hand, recording everything. I could have told him the truth right then, that I'd sung for presidents and queens, that critics had called my voice a gift from heaven, that I'd earned more in one performance than he probably paid me in a year. But that wasn't why I'd left that life. I'd left to find humility, to remember that every person has worth beyond their achievements. So I simply nodded. "I understand, Mr. Ashford. I'll collect my things." He pulled out his phone and called the security desk. Within minutes, 2 security guards arrived. They looked uncomfortable. They knew me. We'd shared coffee during breaks, talked about our families. But they had jobs to protect, just like I'd had mine. They escorted me to the elevator, one on each side, as if I were dangerous. As the elevator doors began to close, I saw Richard turn to Isabel. Isabel's face was pale. She clutched her phone tighter. The elevator descended, carrying me away from a job I genuinely enjoyed. But something else was ascending. Isabel's hands trembled as she looked at her phone. The video was complete. My singing, pure and beautiful. Then Richard's cruelty, captured in all its ugliness. She didn't hesitate. She uploaded it to every social media platform she could find. Her caption was simple but powerful.
"Fired for having a beautiful voice. This is what happened at Ashford Global tonight."
Within an hour, the video had 10,000 views. Within 3 hours, 500,000. By morning, when Richard Ashford woke up expecting a normal day, the video had been viewed 20 million times. And the comments were pouring in from people who recognized my voice. My past had found me, and Richard Ashford's comfortable world was about to collapse. I woke up in my small apartment to the sound of my phone ringing. Over and over. Calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I turned off my notifications before bed, but somehow the world had found me anyway. When I finally looked at my screen, I saw hundreds of messages, emails, text messages from people I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. They all said the same thing. "Lorenzo, is that really you?" The video had spread like wildfire across the internet. But it wasn't just ordinary people watching anymore. News outlets had picked up the story. Television stations, newspapers, radio programs. By noon, Ashford Global Enterprises was drowning in a media firestorm. Protesters gathered outside the corporate tower. They carried signs that read, "Respect all workers," and "Art has no class." The company's stock began to fall, 5% in the first hour, 10% by lunch. Major clients started canceling contracts. Sponsors pulled their support, and Richard Ashford, sitting in his corner office, still had no idea who I really was. His assistant knocked on his door, carrying a stack of newspapers. Richard barely looked up from his computer. She hesitated at the door. He waved her away dismissively, but outside his window, the protesters were chanting. Their voices rose up from the street below, 16 floors down, but loud enough to hear. Meanwhile, across the world, opera houses were making announcements. The Metropolitan Opera in New York released a statement. The director stood before cameras, his voice filled with emotion. In Milan, the artistic director of La Scala held a press conference. In Vienna, in Paris, in London, the greatest opera houses in the world all spoke with one voice. They were outraged. They demanded justice. They called Richard Ashford a tyrant who didn't understand the treasure he destroyed. But Richard still didn't understand. He sat in his office, watching his company crumble around him, convinced that the world had gone mad over a janitor. That's when his phone rang. It was his mother. Eleanor Ashford was 72 years old, elegant, cultured, a woman who had spent her life supporting the arts. She was also the source of much of Richard's wealth. Her inheritance had funded his first business ventures. Her connections had opened doors, and she had just watched the viral video. Eleanor sat in her penthouse apartment, staring at her computer screen. She'd watched the video 5 times already. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone. When Richard answered, his voice was irritated. Eleanor's voice was ice cold. Within the hour, Eleanor Ashford was in her car, heading to her son's office. In her handbag, she carried proof. Programs from La Scala, reviews from the Metropolitan Opera, photographs of me standing with Pavarotti, with Domingo, with the greatest voices of our generation. She carried the truth that would shatter her son's arrogance. And I sat in my apartment, watching it all unfold on the news, knowing that my quiet life was over. The reckoning was coming. Eleanor Ashford arrived at her son's office like a storm. She didn't wait for his assistant to announce her. She simply walked through the door, closed it behind her, and dropped her handbag on his desk. Richard looked up, surprised but not yet worried. She opened her handbag and began pulling out documents, programs, photographs, reviews printed from prestigious newspapers. She spread the photographs across his desk. There I was, younger, in full costume at La Scala, bowing before a standing ovation at the Met, shaking hands with Placido Domingo. Richard stared at the photographs. His face turned pale. She picked up one particular photograph. It showed me receiving an award in London. She held it up to his face. Richard's hands shook as he picked up the documents. He read the reviews, saw the acclaim, understood, finally, what he had done, and he knew his company was dying because of it. 2 days later, I received a formal invitation to Ashford Global Enterprises. It was delivered by courier to my apartment. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering, very formal, very desperate. Richard Ashford requested my presence at a televised public meeting. He wanted to apologize before the cameras and offer me my position back. I sat in my small apartment, holding that invitation, and I had to decide what kind of man I wanted to be. I could refuse, let him suffer, let his company collapse, or I could show him the grace he'd failed to show me. I chose grace. The meeting was held in the main lobby of Ashford Global Enterprises. Cameras from every major news station were there. Reporters packed the room. I arrived wearing simple clothes, jeans, a clean shirt. I was still Mateo the janitor, at least in appearance. Richard stood near a podium, looking smaller than I remembered. The arrogance was gone. In its place was fear and shame. When I entered, the cameras turned to me. Flashes went off. Reporters shouted questions. But I walked calmly to where Richard waited. He couldn't meet my eyes. The cameras rolled as he stepped to the podium. His voice cracked with emotion. He turned to me, his eyes pleading. The room fell silent. Everyone waited for my response. I stepped forward and I spoke clearly so everyone could hear. I forgive you, Richard, but I won't take the job back. A murmur went through the crowd, not because I hold a grudge, but because what happened here wasn't really about me. It was about something much bigger. I turned to face the cameras. Every person has dignity. The janitor cleaning your floors, the security guard watching your doors, the receptionist answering your phones. Every single person deserves respect. My voice grew stronger. You don't value people based on their job titles. You don't measure worth by position or salary. You measure it by character, by kindness, by the content of their heart. Richard fired me not because I did bad work. He fired me because he couldn't see past my uniform. He couldn't imagine that someone in my position might have dreams, talent, or value. That's the real crime. Not firing Lorenzo Batista, the opera singer, but failing to see Mateo, the human being. The room was absolutely silent. I could see tears on some faces. We must learn to honor the dignity in all people. The moment we start dividing humans into those who matter and those who don't, we lose our own humanity. I looked at Richard. I hope you've learned that lesson. I truly do. Because it's not too late to become the kind of leader who sees worth in everyone. Richard nodded slowly, tears in his eyes. I shook his hand, and then I made an announcement that surprised everyone, including myself. I'm returning to opera. I'm scheduling a benefit concert at the Cultural Center of the Philippines. All proceeds will go to scholarships for underprivileged music students. Young people who have talent but not opportunity. Young people who might work as janitors or drivers while dreaming of something more. The room erupted in applause, and Eleanor Ashford stepped forward from the crowd. She smiled at me, and I saw genuine warmth in her eyes. The concert was set for 1 month later, and my quiet life as Mateo the janitor was finally over. While this story is based on historical events and records, some characters and dialogue have been dramatized for narrative effect.